Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. We're here again with our guest host, Marisa, who, if you recall, she's the virtual assistant. She runs her own VA company, and she comes from a background of systems engineering, did her MBA, and is now an entrepreneur. So we decided to talk about productivity and efficiency today, because that's definitely something that if you're ever going to start your own business, you'll need to be really good with your time, or at least you hope you're really good with your time, and you'll probably figure out a whole bunch of things along the way. So maybe we talk a little bit about how is your productivity different now than it was, let's say, when you were in high school, and then kind of how has it evolved over the years to get you to hopefully the most fine-tuned that it is right now, but how has it evolved over your journey?
Yeah, so in high school, I must have done a lot of work because I got good grades and got into a good university, but I'm pretty sure I procrastinated a lot. And I think that definitely carried over into university. And there was really no incentive to stop procrastinating because it was working. I think part of that I realized in university was certain times I wouldn't procrastinate, like I do an assignment ahead of time, and then I'd get a lower mark, and I'd think, well, maybe the procrastination was helping somehow, or what's the point in putting in all this extra effort if I'm gonna get a lower mark. And so having a procrastination habit kind of prevented me from what I realized at university was I found that if I procrastinated something, there was a strict time limit on it. There's 2-3 hours before it was due. That was the time I had allotted to it. And I could kind of avoid my perfectionism because it's like I just had to get it done
Right.
in that time period. And it also prevented me from recognizing my capped out potential. Like if I worked really hard on something but didn't get a great success from it, I thought that I was reaching my potential and realizing that was the lowest or the best I could do, and it wasn't good enough. Whereas with procrastination, if you do less well, it's like, well, I only had 2 hours to do it. So that was the reason I didn't do so well. So it was maybe kind of a self-protective mechanism as well in that situation. But now that I've started to recognize those patterns, I can kind of avoid them as much as possible, though I'm not going to say I'm perfect with that. Now, when I think of productivity, I think of self-care as an important one, because a lot of those mindset issues were because I didn't have great self-care for myself. And so right now I've started to implement a day on Sunday where I just don't do any work. And I know that's really hard for students to do. I tried to do it in university. It was really difficult. But when I have control of my own schedule as an entrepreneur, it's a little bit easier that way, to take a Sunday off to make sure I don't do any work. And then when Monday comes around, I feel refreshed and ready to go. So yeah, taking self-care as a priority has been the biggest game changer for my productivity.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective where the procrastination is kind of a perfectionist avoidance issue, and it's kind of the when I'm almost hearing about it, it's kind of that fear of success type of thing, where like if you actually put in all the effort that you could, right, you might actually do an amazing job, and the other part is the fear of failure, or it might suck and you might get a lower mark. So let's kind of hedge and not even put all that effort, because we might as well have fun and procrastinate, because it's not really worth it. And then we don't have to deal with the repercussions of I did my best and I still wasn't enough. So maybe that's the more that I'm not enough type of thing. But I think that's an interesting perspective, that if folks in high school and in university can realize that procrastination doesn't help. It's one where if you can take care of yourself, putting those self-care days or whatever could be could be useful. A lot of people when they're doing stuff, being productive, they just want to do things like as fast as possible and do it as efficiently as possible. But we were chatting off air about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. So what's your kind of definition, and how do you mark the difference between the two?
I honestly might have stolen this definition from you, but effectiveness is to me getting the right things done, and efficiency is just getting them done, and just getting them done, I guess, like as maybe as fast as possible. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of people are focused on the efficiency, doing it faster, doing it quicker, but not necessarily doing the right things. It's the whole kind of work hard versus work smart type of thing. So the effectiveness should be the work smart part. And maybe procrastination is that effective working, right? Where you put yourself in a mode where you only have 3 hours to do, so you try to do that as efficiently as possible. I don't know. That's just maybe explaining some of the strange behaviors that we have, or pretty much everybody has as a university student. Because we all know that we should start our assignments right away, right? We all know, and we've been told, but nobody ever does. So I'm just curious if there's a reason for that. But so
Yeah.
now that you've had all these realizations and you're better at self-care and things like that, you're just better at time management in general. So talk us through like kind of time management, your priorities, and then we talked about like energy as well. How do those all factor into the whole time management equation?
Yeah, so what I realized in university, I'm still this way. I still tend to say yes to a lot of things because I mean, there's room on my calendar, so sure.
Sure.
But and I really have gotten a lot out of the opportunity, as I said yes to. So for me, it was kind of realizing there's a distinction between having the time for it and having the energy for it.
Hmm.
And I'm still kind of figuring this out for myself, but just because you have the whole day doesn't mean you can schedule the whole day with commitments. Um, and for energy management, it's also realizing what parts of the day are you going to be able to do your most like focused deep work. And so is that like your creative work, or that, you know, writing that paper or doing that tough problem set? You want to schedule that in the time that works the best for you. And I know some of my friends that was like midnight. For me, it was in the morning around 9 a.m. So if I didn't have a class, then I would try to do my work then. And that's what I do as well as an entrepreneur. I try to schedule my meetings around the time, because for meetings, I don't need to have as much focused energy. And I get energy from other people as well. So during my low points, I am able to have meetings with people. And then during the points when I have the most energy, I work on some of that creative stuff or strategy work that I have.
Yeah, and I think what comes to mind is for your point about like understanding your own productivity and when you're most productive. There's a concept called a chronotype, which talks about when you're most productive, and they have different researchers that use kind of different animals, where if you're a morning person, you're more of a lark or a lion, where you wake up at the crack of dawn. When you're like a night person, you're either a wolf or an owl. And then if you're kind of in the middle, you're kind of like a bear or a third bird, because I guess they couldn't find whatever kind of wakes up normally, right?
I think I'm a bear. I think that I did that quiz.
Well. So the interesting thing is for those you might actually change your chronotype, right, over time. Where I think they were saying evolutionarily, like as kids, well, if any of you have kids, you know your kids are pretty much at the crack of dawn, right? On the weekends, they're still up at 6 or 7 a.m. even though everyone's trying to sleep in for a hard week, but they do that, right? So they're in that camp. And actually, as teenagers, as young adults, folks are naturally more those night owls or the wolves, and apparently evolutionary is to help the tribe, right? Because if there was like a lion or a jaguar or something that came crawling out, it's probably a jaguar because I don't think lions go at night, but But if there's something that came crawling, you would probably want some of the most stronger, fitter people, which are generally the young adults and the teenagers, to be able to fight it off and warn everybody, right? So they're natural to have a tendency. But the thing is, when you get older, then you tend to revert to kind of the normalcy of it, where you're that bear or you're that third bird or whatever it is. So you do change. And some people continue with their night owl wolves or whatever, and some people still continue with their morning stuff. But yeah, people are predispositioned. So I think that's a very good point to know kind of your tendencies and figuring out what works best for you. And then make sure that you're taken care of from things like a health perspective. So I usually break it down in terms of like sleep, exercise, and nutrition. But what are some of the other things that you've done to kind of take care of yourself from a physical perspective or from an other health perspective?
Yeah, morning routines have been like touted as the be all end all, and they're the greatest thing ever. And I was a little skeptical, but once I started to actually have one, I can agree that it's a really great thing for me, especially as a person who does their best work in the morning. It really sets me up for the rest of the day. So for me, I like to incorporate a little bit of exercise. I don't like to make anything too long, because if it takes too much time, then I might skip it. So I just do 10 minutes of getting my heart rate up, 10 minutes of prayer, 10 minutes of meditation and stuff like that. So just keeping it small to get through all the things that you want to do, so that your morning routine isn't 2 hours long, for me has really helped me with that consistency, especially with an entrepreneurial job. It's kind of all over the place. So having something that's consistent, and same with a student, your life is all over the place. Having something that's consistent every morning helps build those habits, and also helps your brain, get ready for the day.
Yeah, I think that's important. And resource that comes to mind is Hal Elrod has a book called The Miracle Morning, and he uses the acronym SAVERS. Let's see if I can remember all of them. S is I think it's silence, where that's kind of like the meditation part of it. A is an affirmation, where you kind of just set your intentions for the day. B is visioning, so it's kind of in addition to the affirmation, you're actually putting yourself in the position to be successful. E is exercise, right? Movement is good. R is I forget what R is, and then the last one is scribing, right? Where it's the journaling part of it, right? So hopefully I can find what that is. But there are all sorts of different mornings that you can have, and even has one as short as like a 6-minute one, right? Where you just spend 1 minute on each. But to your point about consistency, I think that is super helpful, right? So even as a student, if you want to incorporate something as simple as that into your day, and the thing is, with the morning routine, it's basically when you wake up. If you wake up at 4 a.m. or if you wake up at 12 p.m., it's still something that you should start your morning with. So whatever your chronotype, whatever, if you can start your day off with one of these, I think it would be helpful. What about things like mental wellness? What are some of the things that you've done in that area?
Yeah. So for me, I started doing meditation a little bit when I was really stressed, in like looking for co-op jobs and all of the assignments. So I started doing it then. And for me, I kind of dropped off. But then I recently picked it up. Um, when I was starting to notice more like physical signs of stress in my body, like a clenched jaw, or um, a lack of focus or something like that, um, I started to realize that maybe that was something that was helping back then. So maybe I should bring it back. And so I used the app Headspace. I also use a Christian meditation one called Abide. So I really like that guided part, because it gives you some clarity on what you should be doing. Headspace walks you through the basics. So you don't have to be worried about not knowing what to do. Um, and so that has really helped me in the mental aspect of well-being.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Where I've tried unsuccessfully to get meditation as a habit, or mindfulness as a habit, for the longest time, and then yeah, I got an app, and then the guided part is one where just sitting there by yourself without the guided part, it's boring and you get so distracted and you don't know if you're supposed to be doing this. But with that guide, it definitely helps with just a few prompts here and there to say, okay, yeah, bring yourself back because your mind is wandering. It's like, all right, fine.
How'd you call me
Refocus
out
on
like
your breath.
that?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. How did you know I was thinking about my breakfast or this and that or the next appointment? I think that's super important. But do what works for you because there's all sorts of different ones. Most of the apps are more mindfulness focused, and then there's all sorts of different meditation apps and things like that, right? And one thing that I want to kind of bring out from a health perspective is also relationships, where especially in times like this in COVID, where we're social distance and not able to kind of meet each other on a regular basis, or being more proactive about connecting with each other is important because it's that connection that often keeps us sane. So making sure you're proactive about it in these times, because yeah, normally you just bump into someone in the hallway in the whatever, but you can't. So now you have to say, hey, can we jump on a Zoom call? So those are some things that needs to be addressed. What about for yourself? What are some of the things that have been helpful for you, either in the past or now, about kind of improving or maintaining your relationship health?
Yeah, something like I like to do when you're feeling like you have, not a lot of time for exercise or not a lot of time for relationship stuff, if you can kind of like pair the things together. So, um, the past weekend I went tobogganing with some friends, and that was something I hadn't really done since probably I was a child. But it was great because I got to see people in a safe way. I got to exercise. It's a lot of exercise walking up those hills. And three, I got to spend time outside, which is also good for your mental health. So,
Right.
when you compare all of those self-care things together, you're kind of getting, what is it? Two birds with one stone.
Sure. Yeah. Or multiple, maybe 3 or 4 in that particular case. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's definitely good. And I think one thing that is important is to allocate the time to do all these things. So doing things like figuring out your priorities and all these things like that, allocating the self-care time, right? Actually putting it in your calendar. This is when I'm going to do this, right? And it can move around and it doesn't have to be exactly there, but at least it's one where you make that conscious effort to put in there. And then when you have that little bit of discipline where you say, I will make sure that every day I will do something in any of these areas for half an hour, 15 minutes, then that discipline actually gives you a lot more freedom, because when you take care of yourself, then you can actually do pretty much anything you want. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then a lot of stuff creeps in on you at the worst possible time to do that, right? So um, we were talking off air about things like expectations. So how does that factor into kind of your planning and your day and things like that?
Yeah, so I tend to have pretty high expectations of myself. And so that kind of creeps into my planning routine. I think, okay, I'm gonna have, 4 priorities. And so I like write them all down in order of priority. I try to time block. I've started time blocking because I found it was hard to really know what to be doing as an entrepreneur otherwise at any given point. So I found that has been helpful. But by the end of the day, if I've only gotten 2 out of the 4 things done, I kind of feel down on myself. And so I realized to think of it more like a process. Like I like to say, uh, it's always a process. So you can have your ideal time blocked calendar, but I think the important part in learning through the process is reflection. So at the end of the day, what I like to do is I like to write down, how much, like what percentage of stuff did I get done that I thought I was going to get done? How well did I stick to my schedule? And then any points about, hey, maybe next time schedule a little bit more buffers around meetings, or maybe only expect to get 2 things done. So you start setting those expectations with yourself based on reflecting every day. And then I kind of look at those on a weekly level. And I'm saying this as this is the first week I'm doing that, so we'll see how that goes. But I think that will really help me in understanding my expectations and what actually happens.
Yeah, and I would attest to that. And I don't do it as frequently as I should, but I know it's one where I do kind of take the time and say, oh, you know what? what I planned to do like consistently, whatever, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, worked then, but now things are a little bit different. So I need to adjust and change. And then when you revamp your schedule and then move things around based on your new priorities, then things go back and get better. And then you got to make sure that in whatever 3, 4, 9, 12 months, you reflect again to make sure things haven't gone out of whack. So I definitely would reflect that to say that it is a good practice to have, having done it for a while. But at the same time, yeah, I still forget about it here and there. So I need to schedule that reflection time and and then make sure
and hopefully actually do it.
yeah, and hopefully actually do it and have the energy to do it at that point as well. Um, I think that refinement is definitely a good point where you hope and pray that it's going to take you an hour to do or 2 hours, whatever it is, but it often doesn't. What I encourage folks to do is make sure to add some slack time, right? To say, okay, your day will never go hour by hour, minute by minute as you planned, right? So when things don't, can you make sure you have half an hour buffer, so that when things don't go according to plan, and then if things do, then you got a bonus, right? And figure out what you want to do with it. So either start that new initiative or just kind of relax and chill for a bit, because you probably deserve it. I think it's definitely good. And I think from that perspective, all of this self-care that we incorporate into our time management in order to manage our effectiveness and efficiency can help us to prevent burnout, right? Because that's one of those things that entrepreneurs often struggle with. I think you're mentioning sprinting than burning out. So what are some of the things that you've experienced or have helped you to avoid that situation?
So I can first talk about my experience with burnout in university. I with the procrastination technique, you tend to get a lot of stuff piling up at the same time. So you start, when things are piling up, you're like, okay, I finally have to get all these stuff done. So you sprint through that, and then after the due dates, say like after midterms, you're like, okay, I'm really tired. I'm going to just slack off again for another like 2 weeks, and then you realize, oh, I have all this stuff I need to do, and then you sprint again. So yeah, so the burnout comes in when you burnout actually has a lot of factors like lack of motivation. So after sprinting, even though I shouldn't procrastinate next time, like that was not a fun time, I shouldn't do that again, you still have like no motivation to get ahead of the schedule, even when you can, because you're just so burnt out from that and you just don't want to and have lack of motivation in that sense. So I think instead what I'm trying to do is going back to those realistic expectations, even if it's just something small. I'll give an example from like my morning routine, because I mentioned you don't want it to be too overbearing. You don't want it to take 2 hours. Say you woke up really late one day. I don't skip my morning routine. I just make my exercise like 10 jumping jacks, and then I spend 1 minute journaling instead. So like just shrink it down so that you keep that consistency, so it's still a habit, but you're not overwhelming yourself, and you can kind of adapt to those unexpected events in your schedule.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point of this, or the topic of this session, where it's productivity and efficiency. So we want to make sure that we're productive by doing things that are important to us, which is really being effective instead of efficient. Part of that is managing your time, but it's more than just your time. It's also your priorities, right? That you have your model week and everything is set there, but you have the energy to do it. So that's where all the self-care comes in, taking care of yourself, your physical health, your mental health, your relationship health, and all those other healths that you have to take care of. And when you have that discipline to do that, then you're actually free in those in the framework to do pretty much whatever you want. And by doing that, it's preventative to help prevent that burnout from happening. And yeah, you'll accomplish so much more, all that. And we're definitely not advocating that procrastination technique because that almost spurns burnout. But at the same time, it's a reality. So being able to pull yourself out of it is good, and maybe that's coupled in with good friends that can help you along the way and help reprioritize there. And yeah, maybe you have some of those other consistent morning routines or whatever that kind of help you back there. But yeah, I think that was a lot of good information on productivity and efficiency, and hopefully folks can apply some of that in their day. And yeah, let us know what has been helpful for you in your productivity and efficiency. So thanks, Marisa, for joining us again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.